What is going on, everyone? AP over here at Run Pure Sports, bringing to you, like we always do each and every week, the Lineup Builder Show with our partners, Sabersim. I got Jordan in here. Jordan, what is going on, my man?
Not a whole lot, excited for another week here of PGA DFS. Always a fun one with the American Express. I kind of like the format here with the different courses. I think it makes for a little bit of an interesting lineup building process here. So our third week now with our new updated PGA model for 2023. So seems like it's been going pretty well for me so far, especially I've been playing a lot of Showdown, having a lot of success with that. So just excited to keep the season going here and build some lineups.
Yeah, I mean, same here. I'm coming off a good week. Not like I didn't take anything down, but it was a positive ROI week. And I'm not gonna lie, like what I did was very similar to what we went through on the show. So I try to be pretty transparent. I think it's going to be the same case today when we break down the AmEx. It's an interesting event this week. The thing that people are going to remember is John Rahm, being all tilted about this being a putting contest. Like we said last week, one thing that I love about Sabersim and this tool is the way that we can embrace variance and volatility in the unpredictability of these birdie fest type of events, because all of these guys are professional golfers. And when it comes down to who has a hot putter, that it's tough to get separation if you're one of the elites that has a very, very well-rounded game when you're relying strictly on a putting contest. So do I think ball striking, finding fairways is important here? Yes, I do. The other thing that really pops for me a little bit is driving seems to be negated a little bit. And that's why you're going to see shorter hitters come into play. So my approach is going to be a little similar to last week, but I do think that we have some anchors up top. Like last week, Jordan, I faded a lot of the like 10K and up guys, and I loaded up on the 9 and like mid-range type of builds, and that was successful. This week, for me, projecting to be kind of the opposite of what I did last week. So it's gonna be interesting. Do you have any thoughts? Just headed into this week as far as like strategy goes, or what you're going to be initially looking at before we dive into our builds?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like research specifically for this week, I haven't had a chance to get into a lot, so excited to see like what the Sims spit out here and be able to do a little bit of this live for you guys. So I think that'll be cool. I mean, on just the Sims in general, I mean, you mentioned the volatility here, right? Part of the reason that Sims are so useful for golf is because we are actually, we're not just giving average projections here. We have the average projections, but we're actually simulating this tournament out as it can possibly play out thousands of times. And that lets you capture that volatility, right? When you look at a guy like KH Lee here, you see his projection 75-35. I pull this up every week, but it's actually kind of a unique distribution here where, sometimes he's going to miss the cut, sometimes he's going to make the cut, and then the tail of outcomes here where he's, top 5 or winning the thing or something like that. I actually think I gave the example last week with Tom Kim here, highest salary golfer in the field, of how he still in our Sims had a 14% chance to miss the cut. And then he did miss the cut, right? And it gives you like the perfect example of, average projections. If you were just going off that, trying to use normal optimizers to build, you're not going to capture that upside and downside of these golfers any given week well. And the Sims are just going to do a really good job of that. So I think it's really valuable there. A couple other notes I just wanted to mention here before we really jump in. One, if you're following along here, or maybe you were experimenting with some builds this morning, we actually just like a couple minutes ago pushed an ownership update. So the ownership projection should be a little more dialed in. I know AP, we were talking like 5 minutes ago and I mentioned that they looked a little off. Our guys just pushed an update there. So feeling better about those ownership projections. And this week, when we have different golfers playing on different courses each round, especially at least rounds 1 through 3, we are actually capturing that in the model here. So always worth looking into that a little bit closer, especially for Showdown if you want to do a little bit of additional research there. But we are looking at that. We've got La Quinta as the easiest course here, the Stadium course as the toughest one. So depending on who's teeing off on which course each round, we're capturing that, especially for Showdown. I think that's going to be really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, it brings in an interesting kind of debate discussion with all these tools that we have. And, the industry, and like, unless you're a casual that's not following it and you're just randomly entering contests, not knowing that there's an edge to a specific course, I mean, if we had more people like that, it would create a true edge. But now, like, it's going to be interesting. One thing I'm going to look at really closely is ownership, because I believe it was last year, and I have to go back and look at it. I think the easiest course, I mean, the golfers there were just insanely high owned, where you almost had an edge by just pulling a few golfers from the harder track in and mixing them and matching them, versus like going all in on the easy course. So when it comes to Showdown, that's going to be interesting. And that's something I'm going to be looking at. And we have Showdown content over here at Rumpier Sports. Snyder does a playbook for all rounds. We have videos over on the Mayo Media Network this week, Thursday and Friday. And then we have our own premium show that's going to be on Saturday, breaking down the final round. So make sure you tune into those shows, and then you can use that with Sabersim. Let's dive in, Jordan. Let's get our base build going. So we talked about, like last week, our big emphasis. In one, we had 3 people in the chat that were giving us a hard time about a weather edge. I mean, excuse me. They said the morning wave on Thursday was a massive edge. The afternoon round ended up shooting better than the morning round. So I'm telling you, when it comes to winds, if you see 10 to 15 miles an hour, it doesn't matter. Like, that does not matter for these professional golfers. When you get to 20 plus, 25, 30, that matters. That has an impact on everyone. I'm telling you, light winds like 10 to 15 miles an hour is not a huge. These guys know how to handle that. So it was proven last week. So again, I'm always on board for a weather edge, but I like a true weather edge. The other thing about this week is the 10K plus guys last week, I thought were far riskier. And actually, could you go back to the home, or I don't know if you could still click on these guys, but I'm really curious. So let's look at, here's one thing I love to look at. So click on John Rahm. Mm-hmm. I'm really curious to see all right. So when I see this and look at this, I show like, I mean, this guy's not missing a cut, and he has massive win upside. But what I see in there a lot of too is the likely outcome here is a top 10 and anywhere from 100 to, whatever their points scored. That I see him falling inside the top 10 to get that type of a score. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, John Rahm for me is going to grade out as a very good play. What do you see when you look at a graph like this? Because I think when we looked at Tom Kim last week, you saw a lot more, bars going upwards in the 40, 50, 50 range.
Yeah, and I think these can be really interesting to look at for golf, because there's going to be discrepancies and differences between individual golfers, right? So Rahm's projected for 100 points even, and you can see that's a very, I don't want to say it's a safe projection, but all of his most common outcomes are around and very close to 100 points. It almost looks a little bit like an NBA player distribution looks like if you go over and flip over to NBA. So he's much more likely to achieve that outcome, and then still has the ceiling there. You can also look at the actual percentages over here. Yeah, go ahead.
Also, continue on, but then can you pull up, the other one I wanted to see was Scheffler, and then Patrick Cantlay too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of these top guys are going to have kind of a similar distribution here. Scheffler, I mean, a little bit more spread out, right? The bars aren't as high, like a little bit more volatility here in his distribution. Let's look at Cantlay as well.
And the point I'm getting at, so, and this really confirms like my strategy this week. So we know Birdie Fest brings more of the field into play, but we have these anchors up top that we can use to get overweight on in our lineups, fade the mid-range where there's going to be a lot of volatility, and bring in some of these punts, like an Andrew Novak at 6'4", who no one knows, Andrew Landry at 6'5", who's an absolute course horse here. He's got a first and a second over the last 5 years. EVR down there. I mean, that's just seeing those distributions right there and the sims that you guys run really confirms the strategy that I have coming in, where I'm just going full on, jam as many studs in as I can, fill it with some of these punt values, and then get like a Kirky or an Adam Hadwin in the mid tier. That's kind of where my strategy is. And I just seeing those range of outcomes there really kind of confirms the route that I'm on.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think also what that has something to do with is the 54 round or 54 hole cut here, right? We're cutting after round 3. So these guys have a little bit more time. I think with a larger sample size of rounds being played, the better golfers are going to be more likely to make the cut and get into that round 4 there. So, yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Could you go to Tom Hoagie now?
Yeah.
So he's a guy that grades out really well. He's going to be chalk. So here's the other thing too. He's going to be chalk, but look at the distribution range here. I mean, a lot more risk when you think about Hoagie, and he's going to be 20-25% owned. So I mean, I love using this chart, just seeing the range, like the range of outcomes that you guys run in the Sims, and then comparing it to ownership. I think that alone is one way that you can use this tool that you guys have. It's incredible in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, as you go down the list here, right, you're going to see less safety for some of these guys in that average projection, right? I mean, you look at a guy like Jason Day here, right, 73.38. His most common outcomes are not around that number, right? I mean, most common overall is not even making the cut here, this like 43-point performance. So you can see a lot of those top-end guys, a lot of safety in their projection this week. I mean, you can see it reflected in the ownership projection too. But as you go down the list, you introduce some volatility there.
Let's go to one more, and then we'll get back to our build. But Andrew Landry, just because he's a course horse guy, and I'm curious to see the guaranteed 3 rounds makes me like these punt values even more.
Yeah. So I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, there you go. I mean, we know what the risk there in the likelihood of him, missing that cut and not playing the final day, but he's got some upside. I mean, you can see it right there in the graph, probably more so than others in this range.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you're talking about a guy like this, I mean, his salary is 6.5 here. I mean, he's basically paid himself off for your lineup at the ownership. I mean, we're basically projecting him probably a point or less of ownership here at the moment. Once he makes the cut, if he's playing round 4, he's basically paid his way into your lineup there. So doesn't even really need to do much beyond that for it to be a good play. And then if you get that top 20, that high upside finish, even better. So yeah, I mean, I think golf is really interesting. Again, if you go back to NBA or something like that and you look at these distributions, a lot of them look the same, right? They're all generally going to have kind of a similar bell curve. They get really different when you start looking at the golf distributions there. I think it can be a useful research thing there.
Gotcha. All right, let's get back to the build. Can you explain to the people kind of what the base build is that we run each and every week?
Yeah, so a couple things here. So this is the cash build, right? So what I did is I set it to cash settings. We turned the sliders off, right? So this is just the best projected plays. And I think there's a couple things that you can use this for, right? Typically what I like to do is one, kind of figure out, is there an ownership discrepancy here? You mentioned Tom Hoagie's going to be pretty highly owned. I think he is probably going. I'll take the over on an 8.9%, which is where we have him at right now. That may come up here throughout the day, just because he's grading out so well based on the average projection. So you can use it as a little bit of a gut check to ownership projections here to see if maybe you want to make some adjustments there. I think you can also use it in general as just how much do I need to value ownership beyond the Sims, right? And you can see we're getting some pretty interesting plays here that are coming in at very low ownership. It looks like some very nice values here that are going to be pretty low owned. So what that's indicating to me is that we can make builds here where we're getting a guy like Rahm or Cam Young, fill in with some cheaper values that the field just isn't going to get to, that they're missing the upside there. And we don't actually need to leverage ownership very much in our actual build here. So for golf, that's kind of the way I've been using these cash builds for me is, how sharp is the field going to be this week? How close is the field going to be to the best plays? And if they're not going to be that close, which it looks like I think the field's going to be pretty off this week, I'm actually, when it comes time to run my final lineups, I'm going to turn down the ownership fade slider a little bit because I don't feel like I need to have a bunch of extra ownership leverage if we're getting that leverage organically here. So that's really what I'm looking at. Anything else that jumps out to you in the cash build here, or anything that you typically like to look at? Oh, you're muted. Yeah,
I'm muted. Man. So yeah, I mean, Rahm, I like what I'm seeing with Rahm. I guess one thing that pops out is we're not getting a lot of double. It doesn't look like we're getting a lot of double stud builds. It looks like Rahm and then a mid tier or like a 9K, then mid tier. And one thing that I'm going to really push hard for this week is like a Rahm and Cantlay or Rahm and Scheffler, Rahm and Willie Z. Like Rom, he's like, we've seen him, man. He like last year, okay, he was putting bad, but still he finished what? Hold on, let me pull this up. John Rahm last year finished T14, and he was tilted. He was complaining on, I mean, we saw the video on Twitter and all that stuff. Still finished T14. Like felt like a floor type of finish for him. Rahm's going to be like one of those 70% owned anchors for me, where I have him at 70%, and then I'm mix and matching him with other studs. So really interesting, kind of to see the range of players from a roster construction standpoint, or golfers from a roster construction standpoint there, because I like double stud routes this week, and what that means for me is just taking a chance of some of these punts down there, like Tyson Alex. Like there's a lot. We'll get into them for sure. We got a question. I'll bring this up. Mm-hmm. So what would be the steps of building 2 to 3 core golfers per se? Would be better to set them up in step 1 or step 3? I mean, so Jordan, one thing I did last week, I made very few changes in step 1, except for I set some ownership caps in there, and the guys that I had core play tagged in the heat map, I bumped them up a few points, 3 to 5 points. And then the fades that I was fading, I just took them out of the pool. We went through that last week. Very, very similar. That's what I did. Yeah. Outside of that, I didn't make many adjustments in that step 1. I did a lot of things in step 3. But how would you answer this question?
Yeah, and I think that's the right process. Like, first of all, if you know you want 0% of a player, you are fading, you have no interest in seeing that person in your lineups whatsoever, you should just uncheck them, right? Get them out of your lineups ahead of time. Go through and uncheck them here in step 1, basically on the home screen. I don't like to do too much beyond that here for golf, just because I think the sims themselves are so powerful. I like to keep the integrity of the sims. And with a high diversity setting, 1,500 lineups, even with a 150 lineup build, right? If you're playing a large field MME kind of contest, you'll have a lot of natural diversity in there. You can kind of get that core out of that build very easily. So I think we should go ahead and jump into that here with our GPP build here. Let's do it here. Let's assume that we're building for like a large field GPP. And I'm going to turn the ownership fade slider off here. I'm going to put it to 0 for this one. Again, just based on the cash settings alone, I feel like we're going to get some nice leverage automatically. I don't feel like we really need to double count that ownership fade here. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to build a big pool of 1,500 lineups. I did want to touch on this just because I know there were some questions in the Sabersim channel in the Discord this week. You should really be building with pool size most of the time 1,500 lineups, right? That's the maximum amount. I know this is confusing to people sometimes, especially when they first sign up. You think, hey, I only need 150, so I'm going to make that 150. It gives you more flexibility after the build, and it's going to build you better lineups overall if you make that pool size 1,500. So definitely want to leave that up there. I'm going to get this going here, and we'll start talking about what we can do in the build screen. I think it'd be interesting here, AP, if you kind of have a core. It sounds like you got an idea of what that core might be for you this week here. We can talk about how we would go about bumping some of those guys up to make sure they're showing up in the lineups where we want them.
Yeah, I got once we get into my adding some of my bias in. I'm very. So I'll go through very similar to what I did last week. I guess what we did last week. But using the golfers that I'm going to be on this week, because and you'll see if you're a member out there, and if you pull up the heat map, I mean, it's going to be pretty transparent. There's like Bezadenhout, Davis Riley, Harris English, Grillo, Justin Rose. I mean, they're all in that 7K range, fading them all. I mean, the one guy I like is Chris Kirk. He's just been a guy that I tend to play quite a bit. Good ball striker, underpriced, decent game. All right, so when we turn that slider to the max, we're still getting John Rahm. Yeah. A little bit less ownership, but we're still getting him. I like to see that, and we're getting more studs into the build. I like that. I like what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can filter here and kind of see. So here's an interesting thing. So right off the bat, so we are getting a lot of Rahm. We're getting quite a bit of Scheffler and Cantlay, but we're not getting a ton of those guys together. It looks like the main build that the sim likes at the moment here is to pick one of those studs. grab like Zalatoris or Tom Kim or Cam Young in the 9K range, and then fill in with some of those lower owned 7K, high 6K kind of value plays here. So that's what we're getting out of the gate, but we can start making some adjustments here to see if we can get these lineups a little bit more the way we like them. So you said you wanted some of those double stud builds here. So what I would probably experiment with as just a starting point is bumping up the projection on a couple of these guys and maybe telling Sabersim, hey, I think that, this top three, Rom, Scheffler, and Cantlay here is actually a little bit of basically a little closer, right? They all have kind of a similar upside, and see if we can see. You see right away, second lineup now in the pool, we're getting that double stud build here, filling it with some value plays behind there. And you can see how quickly those exposures jump up when we start increasing the projections on some of these guys. And that's kind of what I was talking about here, about that flexibility and diversity that you get with this build here automatically right out of the gate.
Yeah, I like that. How about this? Let's go back to step one.
Yeah.
And because I kind of got this dialed in, what I want to do.
Cool.
And you can give me your thoughts on kind of my process. It won't be complete because that would take a little bit more time. So far right now, all right, give Rom 5 points of a bump. I want him to have the highest bump there. Give Cantlay 3 to 5. So Scheffler, Cantlay, and Rom, give them all bumps. And then Will Zalatoris also. So those are the guys. And then Cam Young, like a 2 or 3 point bump.
Okay.
Leave Finau where he is. Xander, I'm fading. So you can just X him out.
Yep.
Sung J M, I'm fading. Winner last week. Tom Kim, I'm just fading again. He's always owned. The putter, I don't trust the putter right now. So Tom Hogue, I like him, but let's just give him a 2 point, decrease him 2 points.
Perfect.
And then, so a few tournament plays that I like. Brian Harmon, give him like a 2 or 3 point bump. I think he's going to be a good tournament play, just because he's, down in that range. Just, I mean, if he feels overpriced. Sam Burns, give him like a 3 to 4 point bump. This guy, his putter's hot right now. He needs to get the ball striking though. But I mean, he's a guy that can get it going. Aaron Wise, another good tournament play that I like. And then Adam Hadwin down to 8-2 is going to be kind of another anchor that I like down here. Canadian, good course history here, plays well, just a slight bump. And then our guy Locks yesterday on our golf show, very high on Jason Day, said one thing, Jason Day, like a lot of his issues are health related, and he seems to be healthy right now. And if that's the case, getting on him early could be ideal, especially at this track. A few more fades just to, if you want, like Wyndham Clark, you can uncheck him. Justin Rose, Kristen Bezadenhout, Davis Riley, Harris English, you can uncheck him. Grillo, we won't uncheck all of them.
But you can do this, right? Following along with the streams and the content, the heat map, and go through and do this yourself here. What was that last name? I think I missed. Oh, it's Harris English. I got him there.
Yeah. All right. So then so there would be a lot. So we'd go through this, and there would be a lot more so if you pull up the heat map, you'll see, not complete yet, but go down to so Chris Kirk, another core play that I have tagged, give him a 3 to 4 point bump.
There he is.
And we'll leave most of the 6K range alone, but some of these punt plays that I like, I do want to give bumps to. So Benny On.
Oh, that's gonna be. Let's see.
Just type in. Yeah, there you go. Give him Nick Taylor. I like him. A lot of Taylors.
Yeah.
Andrew Landry. So I like this I think the 6K range is just, I think we're going to need it this week. And some of these guys are going to find their way up to the top. Andrew Novak is another one too, a little bump. And then Tyson Alexander, another bump. There's a few others, but I'm really curious to see how these builds look. So then what I did, let's just say I had everything, all the guys I'm fading out. I gave moderate adjustments to their projections, just bumping up the guys I like. And then so I call them just like GPP fillers. I bump those down 2 or 3 points. And that's just kind of what I do off the base projection. And then I ran it. And so here's the settings I used in step 2. I use ownership fade right around 2. And then I use sim diversity 7. It's just what I used last week. Probably something I'm going to, because I want that diversity in there that the sims are going to bring. But then I fine tune things even more in step 3.
Yeah, and it really, one of the things, I think for a long time, we've kind of talked about the sliders as like, don't change these. And I don't think that's really a fair description, right? You can get a lot of value out of making adjustments here. So, I mean, really, right, just a quick explanation of what these are doing. Ownership fade is basically like, how much are we extra going to count ownership? So we're running the sims, we're building lineups based on sims. Then how much do you want to adjust what the player scored in those sims based on whether they're high or low owned? So I'm good with 2 here. I do think coming off of 4 based on what we found in that cash build is a good idea. And the diversity slider is basically like, how concentrated do you want to be in your pool? So we've talked about this before. I play a pretty diversified style. A lot of times I get up here at 9. AP comes down to 7. I think that's totally fine. I would say you probably, at a minimum, to make sure you're getting value out of the sims, want to be around this 6 or 7 range, especially for the large field stuff. So before we run this, I did want to ask, do you want to set a rule to say at least 2 Rom, Scheffler, Cantlay in every lineup, or you want to kind of see just how the sims come out with that?
I just want to see how the sims come out with it.
Okay.
So I didn't set any rules. I just wanted to see. And then I'm always running 1,500 builds. And in step 3, I'm making those adjustments. So there I'm setting like a min and max. I'm doing more of the min max stuff. I used to do it in step 1. I'm doing that more so now in step 3.
And I think
like, I guess how I interpret that is I'm still bringing in kind of that, because like I know it's a field where there's going to be some variance. And so I want to take some of my bias. I like to add my bias in. We know that we've been doing that long enough. But in these type of events, I have to find a way to take some of my bias out. And I think this is like the perfect way to do that. I can still have my bias where I'm overweight on the plays that I want, but at the same time, turn the sim slider up. I'm bringing in some of that variance, if that makes sense. So we're getting, all right, perfect. We're getting a lot of Rom, Cantlay, Cam Young, Scheffler. Yeah, I mean, this kind of – so highlight Rom there. I want to see what these –
So let's see how he gets paired here. So go ahead.
Yeah, so one thing I would do, I would bring – so give me your thoughts on this. I would bring Rom up like this, and I would look at all of the – so I thought I saw David Lingmerth in there as like the highest. So I would then go and I would try to set like a max ownership on him.
Yep,
if that makes sense.
That's perfect.
Because like what I want is more like my anchor is Rom in these builds, and then what I want is to open up the pool a little bit. So I really want to get overweight on Rom, Cantlay, Willie Z, whatever in the top range, and then open up the pool a little bit more, bring in some of these 6K guys. That's kind of how I'm embracing the variance at this putting contest where there's going to be a lot of low scoring. So that's what I would do. I'd bring Rom up, and then I would all the like plays like a Lingmerth, I would set at like 15% max or something. So I mean, can you do that?
So you can't adjust the exposure while you're filtering by a player.
Oh, okay.
We can. I mean, we can go and look and basically see who they're paired with a lot. So let me refresh this here because I just made that change. So let's adjust the max exposure back here. Let me get Lingmerth back just so I can show you guys how I did that. Oh, weird. Okay, so anyway, what I had done is I set basically a max exposure here and then clicked apply, right? So, I mean, perfect. The Sims are saying we like this guy. We don't need 60% of him to get leverage on the field, right? 10% maybe get a bit of him in our lineups. That's good. Ben Taylor is another guy that's popping here. Wasn't a name you mentioned here. So if we wanted to, say, hey, maybe we get 3x the field here. We don't need 30% of our lineups with this guy. We can do the same thing there. And that's going to start evening out the exposures a bit. Now you see, right, you can see with the green here, all of the guys we're getting top exposure to in this build are all the guys you like, which is basically what we want. And then we're letting the Sims kind of pick in, who are those fillers that we're getting to the rest of the lineup. And we're well diversified, right? The guys that we don't have strong stands on here, we're getting pretty even split throughout the rest of the lineup. So you could also go in then and look at a guy like Kirk or Landry or Burns, some of the other guys we bumped up. and see, hey, we're still not getting a lot of them. Maybe we give them a little bit more of a bump or set a min exposure. Or maybe it's a sign that, maybe even after bumping their projection up a little bit, we're still not getting a bunch. Maybe we sit with where we're at. So a couple options here in the build screen.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can do. And I either set like a min exposure or I just bump them up to see how big of a bump. Like, because what's happening there is they're replacing someone else. And so obviously someone else's ownership's going down. Well, right. That person, like a Kirky, is going up. So, I mean, that's kind of like the process that I went through last week. Sam Burns, pretty low there. I think he's a really good tournament play. So to get him up even more, we might even have to go back to step one. So like part of this is a process too. You're going to learn a lot. Mm-hmm. And if you're not getting the results that you want in step 3, I guess what I do is just go back to step 1 and start over. Or like you said, maybe it's just a bad play. Maybe we got to get off that play. That's one thing I do a little bit more in NBA, a sport that I have a little bit better of a read on. But in golf, I would be fine going back to step 1 and just saying, hey, maybe I disagree with the projections here. I'm way higher on this guy. I think he's going to hit a top range of outcome in the Sims. And so I just manually put that in. Maybe it's like a 7 to 10 point bump over a 3 to 5 point bump. So some of it just takes playing around with it. And then, but I mean, this lines up so well for me because like what I see, like ideally what I would want is John Rahm, like 70%, 75%. Then what I would want is like Cantlay, Willie Z, right around 45 to like 55%, something like that. Scheffler, since I'm higher on Rahm than Scheffler, I do want some Rahm and Scheffler builds. I would want Scheffler. I would want to get over the field, but I'm not as concerned about getting like way over the field. So I could see myself being in line with the field or slightly over on Scheffler. And to do that, it takes, I think, fading guys like Sung Jae, Tom Kim, Xander, maybe being under on Tony Finau, then fading Siwoo Kim. And then I'm fading a lot of the 8K and upper 7K range. And then I'm bringing in a lot more of the lower 7K range and the 6K punts to make that work. Is kind of what I see is my path this week. And I mean, what I'm seeing here kind of lines up pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking here, I'm just going through and setting min and max exposures here to these guys to make sure we're getting to those numbers you want. And this is what I was talking about how flexible these builds can be in golf when you have that high diversity setting, right? Very easy for us to go through. We run the Sims, we see what we're getting, and then we say, well, 75% Rahm, boom, done. 45% Cantlay and Scheffler and Willie Z, right? Very easy. We get there. We already went and capped Lingmerth and Ben Taylor, some of those values that were popping a little too hard for us here. So very, very easy for us to go through and get what we wanted here. And, let's say hypothetically that we couldn't get the exposures that we wanted, right? We were, we wanted something and the builder wasn't able to find it. Then we can go back to the home screen again and make some more adjustments to those projections, get the Sims in line with what we're thinking is going to happen a little bit more there. But for the most part, I mean, I really think that you can generally get those exposures you want after doing some light touch adjustments in the home screen and running that build.
Yeah, very good. Can you go through the difference just like when it comes to PGA, like the Saber score versus like projected score and then percentile outcome? I mean, does it align with like every other sport, like NBA and stuff?
Yeah, it's similar. So Saber score, basically what Saber score is doing is it's comparing all the lineups in the pool and it's seeing, how good are these lineups for the sliders that you requested, right? So how much upside do they have in the Sims and how much ownership fade even at a low setting, right? How well do they meet? Basically, the Saber score is Sabersim grading itself on how well it did for each of these lineups. So I think that's a good default. That's what shows up by default here. I think that's probably what I would use most of the time. You can also, run the projected score here, which is going to give you, probably a little bit safer builds, maybe a little bit higher owned builds. So if you are taking some really big stands with some of these guys or really curating a small player pool or you have some lower owned players that you're bumping up the projections on a lot, you could use something like projected score and basically say, I want, the best average projected lineups from this pool that I'm actually going to play. Those lineups are still built using sims. You're just sorting them by the average outcome at the end. And then the percentiles are actually really cool. I think these are really fun to experiment with in golf, especially, 85th, 95th, 99th percentile. This is basically comparing the lineup as a whole. And there's that exposure message I mentioned before here. So, but it's basically comparing the lineup as a whole and giving you the lineups with the highest raw scoring upside across the whole range of outcomes for the sim. So when we switch this one to 99th percentile, basically what this is saying is that, you don't have enough lineups with Scotty Scheffler in it to reach those percentile outcomes with this exposure you set here. So, I mean, we get 38%. We could drop this down to 38%. And we're good to go. But that's basically what that means there. So if you're not sure, start with Saber Score. But as you get familiar, you start building out the process. I would experiment with some of these percentiles in particular. I like to use those quite a bit.
Yeah, very good. Quick question: Are you logged into Run Pure Sports too? Like where you could pull up?
Yeah.
Where if you could pull up, I was just gonna say if you could pull up the heat map. It's not done yet, but just to show everyone how, because this is something that I manage, and I'm 115 each and every week, and you'll get a really good idea of where I'm at. You could follow me if you want, or you could go inverse of me, fade me. I mean, whatever. You can use this as however you want. The purpose of it is just to be very transparent. So you can see in here, I got it defined as core play, solid, fade, GPP, filler, leverage. So really aligns with what we just went through, walking through that process. You could see I want Rahm, Cantlay, Rahm, Willie Z, Adam Hadwin as an anchor that I like, Chris Kirk as an anchor. And then if you keep scrolling down a little bit, there's there's going to be Andrew Landry, a punt that I like. A lot of these plays are going to be GPP fillers. I want them between 5 to 15% max. And you're going to see a lot of blue down here. Mm-hmm. You're going to see a lot of red, which means fade in the mid range, and then a lot of blue just to align with that roster construction that I want. And then at the very bottom, this is just going to be each week. So if you go down just a little bit more, so that's just some key stats that I follow. It changes each and every week, but things that I just like to track. So this week it's course history, best course fit, ball striking will always be there. I want to know who's hitting the ball the best. And then I usually add in some different ones. This week I want to know who plays the best on easy scoring environments. Cantlay, Rahm, pop, big time. And then I want to know who's putting the best right now. And actually it's Rahm, who was putting the worst last time when he came into this event and still finished T14. Now he's putting the best. And then Sam Burns also putting lights out. If he can get the ball striking down this week, I'm telling you, he is a really good tournament play because he's flying under the radar. So that's just a real quick peek at the heat map, and it aligns perfectly with how I use Saber. So I just wanted to show that to anyone out there that doesn't have a membership with Run Pure Sports. And if they want to use that for their multi-entry purposes, you can see exactly what I'm doing each and every week.
Yeah, I love it. And we did, we went through, we talked about some of these names here and made some adjustments. I mean, what I would do is basically pull this up here, look for the guys that you like here. So basically the green ones and blue as well, give them a light touch adjustment with the projection, uncheck the fades, and then run the build, right, exactly as we did, and go through and kind of check to make sure that you're matching the exposures for what's listed here, right? I mean, these are perfect exposure ranges here. You can even put in exactly this, right, 35 to 75% ROM, and make sure that the build's working out basically exactly the way the heat map lists it here. So really powerful stuff, really useful for these kinds of tournaments.
Yeah, good stuff. And my big rule this year is I think last year sometimes I would go way too heavy on certain plays. So like last week, for example, my highest on play was 55%. I was still way overweight on that player. But when that play fails, you still have outs, and which I think is important. So that's where I have that hard rule that there's never going to be an event all season long where I have over 70% of one player. I mean, maybe there's actually, even if a player is completely mispriced in golf, there's still that. I mean, those random things that happen, and understanding ownership and how to get leverage on it, I think is just so massive in today's DFS world. So Yeah, that's just kind of one of my rules. But any final thoughts or any new stuff coming that the people should expect in the coming weeks from Sabersim?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been continuing to dial in this golf model, really focused on that right now. So it should be continuing to improve that, both the ownership projections and the sims going forward. So that's been the big priority on our end. We do have some other ideas that we're cooking up. The one other thing that is getting very, very close, I know I've teased it here a couple weeks now. We really just want to make sure it's working perfectly before we get it out. We pushed some more improvements to this last night, but that's a late swap pool. So right now, when you build your lineups before lock, you get this nice pool. You can adjust exposures, sort lineups from it. Then when you go to late swap for something like NBA, you only rebuild each lineup once, right? A little bit of a letdown there. The late swap pools are very, very close. That's the other thing our developers are working hard on. So when we get that out, I think it might be good for us to do another NBA focus show so we can talk a little bit about that, where in a sport where late swap is so important. So that's the other big thing on the horizon for us.
Awesome. Yeah, very, very cool. Good stuff. We have a jam-packed schedule today, so we're going to get out of here very shortly. We have the NBA rundown at 1 p.m., NFL picking winners, huge, massive NFL weekend. That's at 2 p.m. We got the hardwood at 4:45, like we always do. Then we have the NBA final countdown up to lock. And then tonight, the PGA betting show. So shows all day. You guys are going to be absolutely lined up, and we'll have everything that you need to be able to pick some winners. So, Jordan, always appreciate breaking it down with you each and every week. Really excited that golf is back. I feel awesome. I feel very good about my strategy this week. Hopefully, you guys got a lot out of this show. Again, like I always say, if you ever want us to cover anything, shoot me a DM. Send Jordan a message or myself. Either, I would prefer Discord. You can send it on Twitter too, but I would prefer Discord. I check that far more than Twitter. But with that, I'm AP. That's Jordan. I'm going to get us out of here.